First, when he comes up, you're gonna think, why are we talking all of this about somebody this young? It's somebody who had a long experience but have a lot of energy, like somebody in their 30s. Is our next speaker, Dr. Talat Matar. I think Dr. Talat over the years has been a major figure here for us in the UAE and the region. His work, his kindness with everybody. He's one of the first people that he comes to help you whenever you come to this country over the years. He always, try to take you in the right direction. I'm going to mention a little bit of his biography because I need to be fair, but I cannot mention it all together. At the moment, he is a professor of psychiatry at Ras Al Khaimah Medical School, Medical and Health Science University. He's a consultant psychiatrist. I'm not going to put dates because that's going to give up his age, but he's graduate from Tanta University in Egypt. He has a master's degree in neuropsychiatry in Cairo University, PhD, and you name it. He's been on almost every board of anything, in the Arab region. So he's one of our, let's say, our assets that we always go to whenever we talk. But he has a twist always. So my last question I said, where's biology and all of that? I think, and I'm sure in the next talk, even though I haven't seen it, there's a philosophical part Dr. Talat is going to come to because he's very knowledgeable not just in medicine, in other area. So please, I'm sure we're going to be entertained in the next talk. Please join me to welcome Dr. Talat Matar.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Dr. Samer, for kind introduction, which I don't deserve. And thank you for the organizer of this conference. Today, it is a bit harsh topic. And it is not a complete biology, not a complete psychiatry. It is a mix of psychiatry, philosophy, genetics, and all these. We'll talk about schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, as all of you know, is a very puzzling and very confusing. And if you ask any psychiatrist what is schizophrenia, he will not give you a definite answer. We don't know exactly what is the core schizophrenia. And there is no single symptom is specific for schizophrenia. All symptoms are shared by others. But in spite of that, we are, as a psychiatrist, diagnose schizophrenia. And we don't know if we diagnose a specific disorder or lot of disorders, we are calling them schizophrenia. Should we call it schizophrenia or schizophrenias? The most puzzling questions, why schizophrenia exists, although it has a very deleterious effect, why the human genome did not eliminate it from it because it is not adaptive gene. This is the question which we will try to answer in this lecture. Yes. You know, all of you, that the prevalence is almost the same in different culture, which is a very puzzling question also. Why it is around 1% in the Western, Eastern, in the developed and the developing countries, why it is the same? Although it's highly heritable disorder, and all of us know it runs in the family, but we don't know, we did not exactly find any specific gene for schizophrenia. It's thought to be unique in the human species because we can induce depression, we can induce anxiety in other animals, but we cannot induce schizophrenia. We cannot diagnose schizophrenia experimentally in animal. And this is so the question is, schizophrenia is unique for the human species or not? The prognosis is underdeveloped, and underdeveloped countries are much better than developed and industrial countries. The fertility and the fecundity are lower than general population, although this fact, or in spite of this fact, still the prevalence is the same. Lifespan of affected people is significantly shorter than normal. Age of onset, usually earlier, and symptoms severity in male than female. Among all of you, I think, are aware of this slide, that it is highly heritable disease. But in spite of that, all the genome wide associated studies, which are studies specific to study all the genome of the human being, define 108 loci in the genome that were significantly linked to the disorder. 108, very, very big. You cannot define a specific gene for schizophrenia. Both common and rare, a specific gene varies, seem to increase the risk of schizophrenia, either copy number variants or nucleotide polymorphism. Among associated loci were the genes of D2 receptors. This is only finding which is significant to what we are doing in treating schizophrenia. And voltage-gated channel subunit and genes involved in glutamatergic transmission. The strongest genetic association was found for a locus containing gene involved in acquired immunity. I think last conference we discussed the relation between depression and the immune system, and here also there is a link between depression and the immune system in schizophrenia. The common genome-wide significant loci explained only 3% variance in schizophrenic family liability, where the copy number variants, they call it cyclic nucleotide phosphatase, contribute to only a smaller number. So until now, all the studies fail to find a specific reason for schizophrenia. The question is, how can the bizarre qualities so typical of the disorder be derived from underlying characteristics to be found in normal biology and psychology? How is that the genetic predisposition which result in schizophrenia in some people can result in adaptive traits in others, which we will discuss now? For adaptive, the predisposition must be otherwise no longer be with us, but still with us. Far from eliminating it, natural selection has fixed it and enduring component of the human genome. Why should we study the schizotypal spectrum? If we want to study schizophrenia, because schizophrenia is not a definite syndrome, and there is many schizophrenia spectrum, schizotypal, schizoid, paranoid, personality disorders, all these. So if we want to study, we have to study all these variants to know about schizophrenia. What is the evolutionary hypothesis want to solve? Evolutionary hypotheses regarding schizophrenia have revolved around the apparent paradox of why much devastating disorder exists until now, despite the marked reproductive disadvantage of affected individual by 30 to 70%. Similar to other disorders, it has been proposed that selective advantage, this is the main idea, selective advantage of traits may exist, of which only maybe schizophrenia has advantageous adaptive gene. That's why it's still existing. This hypothesis suggests some advantage of schizotypal traits in relation to the group selection, schizophrenia as a trade-off of the human language acquisition, or a trade-off of the development of our social brain, or trade-off of the civilization. We don't know exactly when the first diagnosis was this schizophrenia. We don't know exactly. Some people claim that in the old pharaohs there are some papyrus which describe something like schizophrenia or like psychosis. But before starting, before showing the different schools trying to interpret schizophrenia, just I give you a very small idea about how the evolutionists think, how the Darwinian people think of our evolution. They say that in our ancestor, there were two types of society. The forest society is fight, flight, dominant submission, or the societies which have the attractiveness or repulsion. And they found that most of the, so we have to fight in the primitive people or the animals, still now the countries, we have to find our position in this world, in this life, okay? So either we need rank or we need attachment. Rank, everybody wants to rank or to be loved. Or, so if we fail to have the rank, this is will result in depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety, reproductive. طبعا this is a very extensive literature to explain how these sexual disorder, gender disorder are all relative to our craving to have a rank or our craving to be attached to other people or to the community. But there are some, all the evolutionists say that the schizophrenia and the related disorder is not related to ranking or attachment. It is related to spacing, the relation between the individual and the society, like avoidant personality, paranoid personality, schizotypal personality, and the schizophrenia. All this we will discuss in some details. So mood disorders are the result of a strategy that evolved much earlier in the context of competition between individuals. Then schizoid disorder are a result of a strategy that evolved more recently to extend competition between groups, where the ultimate function of the manic depressive disease is promote stability with group. The ultimate function of schizoid disease is to split from the group. Yeah, and the manic man want to dominate. Okay? The depressed man want to submit, to adapt with the group. But schizophrenia and the schizophrenic related disorder, they want to separate. They want to avoid, again, the group. Here I will just summarize, I will just mention some of there is not only one evolutionary theory for schizophrenia, there are many evolutionary theories for schizophrenia. We have shamanistic hypothesis, which is a very old one, balancing selection and the positive selection hypothesis. We have physiological advantage hypothesis. We have immune system hypothesis. We have the cliff edge theory. All these are just theory and was very difficult to test. What this is going to validate. There was no enough experimental study. But the other three, sexual selection hypothesis, laterality and cerebral dominant hypothesis, and social brain hypothesis are the most accepted now because they have many proofs and validation and experiment. Shamanistic hypothesis, they say that in our ancestor, when the society grew around 100 or 120, so the resources will not be enough for the tribe. So they have to split. Who will lead the group to split? The shamans. And the shamans, they have specific or have some character which enable them to dominate the other, to attract the other, and they have spiritual hallucinations. You see this picture, how he is hallucinating, and he impresses the other, how he is not like them, he is different, he has special character, and the group will follow him. And without leader like that, there will not be splitting and the resources will not be enough. This is what exactly the shamanistic. So the schizophrenic inherited the genes with our previous leaders or shamanistic people. Huh? The schizotypal charisma, people who are schizotypal have cognitive dissonance. They are not like other in their cognition. They have religious and spiritual preoccupations, disordered language, delusions, and hallucination. And if we see here schizotypy and the charisma, and you see that people who led the world to disasters like Hitler, Charles Manson, Father Jones, and all of you know that who is Manson, the hippies leader, and who is Father Jones, who convinced 400 followers to commit suicide in one day. He collected all of them in a hall like this, and he told them that this is apocalypse, and that this is the end day of the world. And he convinced them to sell all their gold, all their properties, all their things, and they collected in that day, and they commit suicide. And they put some gas, and all died. I think all of you are aware of this event. And you know Charles Manson. These people, they have personal qualities displayed by charismatic. They are charismatic. Otherwise, nobody will follow them. The social condition which people turn to them, the sanctification of the relationship of group member with each other, the paranoid pseudo-speciation and genocide, the outcome, either the establishment of a new culture or annihilation of the group, like what happened with Hitler and Father John. There is another theory, it's very similar to it. Schizophrenia, paranoid type, could be extreme variation concerning the intolerance of the group. So the people who are not fit to the group, they will fit. And this is explained why people who are minority, the schizophrenia prevalence are more than the other people who have minority ethnicity or religions, or people who are feeling they are not accepted by the general community. The schizophrenia and psychotic disorder are more common. There is a theory, balancing selection or positive selective hypothesis. Studies have shown that some of the carriers of the schizophrenia gene may express adaptive benefits such as decrease the frequency of viral infection. When we were residents, our teachers used to tell us that schizophrenic people rarely to get common cold or influenza. And now, in my university, I am running a research how many of the schizophrenic or relatives of schizophrenic have catched coronavirus, and we will compare them to the general population. Additional beneficial traits may include higher IQ, the people of the schizophrenia, increased creativity, and the families of all. So when you find a family of schizophrenia, go to the relative, you will find them many creative people, mathematical reasoning, and I think all of you are aware of John Nash, The Beautiful Mind. One study found that schizophrenia gene associated with schizophrenia found that the T allele on the gene was associated with reduced blood pressure and decreased risk of hypertension. This is one of the studies. One other study that the families of the schizophrenic people, they don't have cancer, for example, or more less liable to give cancer. Carlson investigated epidemiological research in Iceland and demonstrated an increased incidence of psychotic illness, including schizophrenia, in a cohort of particularly gifted artists, philosophers, politicians, and all of us are aware of the Lord Byron. Lord Byron was a very odd person. If you read about him, he was a poet. He was odd in his behavior and his talk. Blake, William Blake also, that is a philosopher. He was also a novelist. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Shelley was also an artist. And these people, they have, if you apply our criteria of schizotypal personality, it will apply to most of these people. There are some genetic explanation for that. Pleiotropic model, pleiotropic model, adaptive gene associated with another gene, or the cliff-edged fitness we will discuss in some detail later on. Then antagonistic pleiotropy. Now, all the genetic people, they say that if there is deleterious gene in the genome of some person, you will find an opposite gene always to antagonize or to make a balance form of balancing selection where two or more alternative alleles are maintained relative high frequencies of equilibrium. يعني when the deleterious gene rise to some extent, you will find another gene to suppress. Here, one of the very influential series and many studies around it and many experiments around it, sexual selection hypothesis. It was started by Nestle, but Chandler and other people who elaborated on it and studied it more, they claim that schizophrenia is the unattractive extreme of mental and behavioral ability that developed a fitness indicator or set of indicators through mutual mate choice in the human genetic properties. You know that in the ancestor, and all of you, if you are aware of Darwinian evolution, you see that there is selective sexual selection and natural selection, and Darwin was focusing on sexual selection to continuation of life. We see it in animals. In birds, for example, you will find the beautiful peacock, which has larger tail and symmetrical tail, will be more attractive. The female will choose it. Then, and also in other animals, the lion, for example, who have a very big also will be more attractive to the lioness. Okay? But what about the human being? The female will look to the muscular man, the big man. No, the courting tools for the human people is language. Always the female are attractive to the man who talk well, who is jokery, who is a philosopher, even if they are not cultured, even they are not interested, but always they attractive to the man who have more ideas, have innovation. Schizotypal traits such as magical thinking, ideas of reference, unusual perceptual experience are associated with enhanced verbal and artistic creativity, and this is what we call a sexual fitness indicator. Several studies have shown that positive schizotypy is associated with artistic creativity, a larger number of sexual partner and preferences are uncommitted sexual relationship. And also most of the studies found that the schizotypal personality have more sexual activity than the other, and which we call it the short life strategy. They don't have long life strategy. They are not looking for a stable relationship. No, they have multiple relationship, unmarried sex or sex with casual sex. They found that it is more common in the schizotypal patient than the normal population. The process of neural development that go awry in schizophrenia should show high sensitivity. So the gene of schizophrenia originally is sexual attractive, but when it increased, it is extreme, it will become schizophrenia, and this will depend on many factors which we will discuss now. Sexual selection model postulate the existence of at least two distinct sources of schizophrenic risk. Rare and de novo mutation, which are overwhelmingly harmful and subject to negative selection, and the schizotype increasing allele, which should be relatively common and evolve under balancing selection, a regime of attaining positive and negative selection of the same allele. The risk of schizophrenia depends on genetic fitness. What is genetic fitness? The environment, all the risk factors we know about schizophrenia, which might lower or increase the risk of schizophrenia. So this is this is the first theory which explains the effect of environment on the schizophrenia or the epigenetic factors, and explain and answer the question why only 55% or 50% of the identical twins are positive, why not the other? So there is other factors, and this theory explains this. And here طبعا this diagram to show that if they have the increasing allele, so and there is a positive risk factor, positive environment, it will go to the schizotype allele, the positive one, and if there is low fitness and the condition, we will go to schizophrenia. They depend. They say that our theory is strong. Why? Because there are many phenomena which prove our theory. They display during courtship the role of dopamine. Yani why schizophrenia is more common and during adolescence. You know, the peak of the age of schizophrenia between 18 and 22 is the age of that. So this is the release of the peak of sexual relationship. Okay, and also because dopamine is always associated with sex, and this is also explain why schizophrenia is common at that age, and affect the probability of mating, rates of marriage, 15 to 73 of normal, and reproduction less in schizophrenia. So it affects the fecundity and the fertility of the schizophrenic people. SSFI اللي هو selective fitness indicator show predictive sex differences, earlier onset in male than in female. Why? Always the onset in male then because they claim that always the male will expert more effort to get the female, and the female prepare the older man, and male prefer the younger lady, and this is explain why it is more common in male than in female in this, why the onset is earlier in male than in female. The development, yeah, this is sometimes they say that, for example, erotomania are common in older female and less in younger males. But schizophrenia is the contrary. The development of SSFI is sensitive to fitness and the condition, as we told that the environmental factor, genetic difference between lineage may affect the fitness sensitivity. That's why this is explained why it runs in the family, although we did not find a specific gene, but it still runs in the family because the family share in the environmental condition. Then there is another important theory. I think most of you psychiatrists, if you are interested in schizophrenia study, know who is Tim Crow. Tim Crow is a British psychiatrist who make, I think, one of the evolutionary thoughts about schizophrenia. He said that schizophrenia is just payoff or the price we paid after the development of language. And the lateralization. If you know where the lateralization starts, it was found in a very preliminary in the upper apes. But all the animals, the other animals, the lowest animals, they have no laterality. There is no laterality in their brain because there is no Broca's area. The Broca's area found also in the upper ape, like chimpanzee and the related monkeys. So he has suggested that an evolutionary theory of schizophrenia that relates the disorder to an extreme variation of hemispheric specialization and the evolution of language due to single gene. The problem of Crow that he attributed it to a single gene, and many criticism for him because where is this gene in the whole book which make the literalization and the language. And he claimed that before 100,000 years or 150,000 years, there was no sophisticated language that we have now, and there was no something called schizophrenia. The schizophrenia, by this, is byproduct of development of language. It has been found that children, yeah, this is his proof. He has many experiments. That's why I told this, the last 3 series, there are lots of validation for them. Has been found that children who later develop psychotic disorder are more often ambidextrous. And they use 2 hands and have more language disorder, behavior disturbance, than children who are adult and not become psychotic. Age at onset is usually earlier, and symptom severity is gender in men, and both features may be associated with normally greater asymmetry between the cerebral hemisphere in men. He explained, if we take that in the sexual theory, he attributed it with the dopamine and the adolescence. Here he attributed to, he found that the lateralization appear earlier in male than in female. And now, until now, all the anatomical studies find that the lateralization are more in male than in female. And there was many protests of female against Tim Joe that, oh, yeah, you are more advanced than us. This is what they found. So this is explain why schizophrenia is in earlier onset in male than female. The representation of language is assured that under normal conditions, the organization of language is segregated such that, all of us know that spatial and logical component is in the non-dominant hemisphere, and the phonetic and the motor component is in the dominant hemisphere, both of which normally interact through the corpus callosum and through the uncinate fasciculus and other fasciculi in the brain. And according to schizophrenia, first-rank symptoms could reflect the disruption of the normal translusal connection of the 2 hemispheres, the neologism, the looseness of association, the incoherence, and all these symptoms might explain that, because there are 2 different areas are not connected to each other through the corpus callosum. He also showed this, how is the connection between the frontal and the occipital lobe is higher in the front side than the occipital, and here is the opposite, Broca's area. And he explained that how the corpus callosum is not equal, by the way. It is small in the front and big in the occipital area, and this is and they found that there are problems in corpus callosum, in this connectivity in the schizophrenic people. Here, very interesting study. I was not believing Crow until I found this study, and I included it in the presentation. If you see here, schizophrenia people who are right-handed, left-handed, or ambidextrous, very, very significant at the age of 7, the people who are ambidextrous, okay? And schizophrenia broad, schizotypal, also still significant, schizotypal people and related disorder. But if we see here in the affective psychosis, it's also significant, but not very significant. In neurosis, no significance at all. So this will prove the idea of Tom Crow. Also, in the age of 11, they did the same study, and they found that also it is very significant in people who will become schizophrenic are ambidextrous. So I hope some of you, if you are interested in research, we can do this retrogradely. We can ask the mother or the parent if their children were ambidextrous or not. Then we have the third theory, important, the most recent one, which is the social brain hypothesis. Social brain hypothesis is the higher cognitive and affective system in the brain that evolved and result of increasing complex social selectivity. This is what Jonathan Byrne Jonas Byrne was a consultant psychiatrist in South Africa, and now he immigrated to UK. And he has a very interesting book. I suggest all of you to read it, The Descent of Madness. The Descent of Madness. This system underlines our ability to function as highly social animal, and they provide the substrate for interact social cognition, social behavior, effective responsible. Social cohesion with a group depend upon the position of complex social cognitive skills. In order to survive, group member need to be skilled in the art of detection and the art to be liar. Yani if we are more, if we have social, how to deceive the other, how to interpret, how to understand the other, how to negotiate. This is the social brain. This is the function of the social brain: facial expression, emotional processing, self-reference. Yani you know that these thoughts are mind. So if there is disturbance in self-reference, the schizophrenic patient will attribute it to the external force. So this is delusion of reference or delusion of persecution. Okay? Then working memory, also one of the character of the social brain. And the most important, which Burns focused on, the theory of mind. Theory of mind, sometimes in some textbook you find it Machiavellian intelligence, some other books called meta-intelligence, some other books like intentional stance. Okay? If you read the book of Daniel Dennett, the types of the kinds of minds, very interesting book also. He knows the evolutions of mind from the very primitive animal, from the instinct until the human being. Okay, and he talked about what defines the social brain is intentional stance, how we are intended to have this attitude. This is the social brain, the prefrontal cortex, the medial region, the orbitofrontal region, the superior temporal sulcus, the amygdala طبعا is the area of processing the emotions. And also he found in the auditory cortex, because they found mirror cells in the auditory area, and primary visual cortex and the fusiform. This is the brain. Here is the Jonas Byrne. He claimed that schizophrenia exists as an unwanted byproduct of the evolution of the prefrontal cortex and the other brain region, and this is explained why schizophrenia is specific to the human being. And he doubted that there was schizophrenia in our ancestor. This is only a sign of civilization. This is the way of the civilization and the evolution of the human being. Etiological research into nonverbal behavior of schizophrenia patients has revealed that they are reduced in their ability to promote social interaction. The disturbance in brain's frontal circuit as a region that largely constitute the social brain can lead to a lack of regulation and cognitive control. Here in the social brain, the impairment is very clear in the schizophrenia. The red one, the areas which are impaired in schizophrenia. There are many studies, theories supporting the social brain hypothesis, like brain development, neurogenesis, neuronal migration, arborization, apoptosis, pruning, and the schizophrenia can happen in any one of these stages. And the prolongation of the maturation of the human brain in comparison to the apes and the other animal is much slower and take longer time, and this give a chance to any deleterious effect will happen. One of the evidence is the brain size, Dunbar number. Dunbar number is the relationship between the number of people whom you can connect to and your brain size. So it was about 150. NP ratio, the ratio between the neocortex and the other brain. In the human being is the highest NP ratio, and the white matter, which are more abundant in people than the other animal. And our cerebellum is very small in in comparison to the apes. We don't need cerebellum, we don't need to jump in the trees. We need our frontal lobe. Also, the theories of heterochrony and hypermorphosis, we will just mention them, and the connectivity, interhemispheric and intrahemispheric, mirror neuron system, Browning, recapitulation, and Newtony. Brain size, as I told you, Dunbar size, NB ratio, white matter, cerebellum, temporal lobe size, corpus callosum, and intra. Feature of brain development in Homo sapien. Newtony, what is Newtony? Whereby a delay in the plateau of the brain growth resulted in a prolongation into adult life. Yani, if we compare, I will show now a diagram to show the comparison between after conception between us and the monks. Okay, we are delayed than the monks in the development of our brain, which you call this Newtony. Newtony, that means that we are slower. Hypermorphosis is the phyletic extension of ontogeny beyond the inter-ancestral termination, such that adult ancestral stage become pre-adult stage. What considered an adult stage of the monkey for us is considered pre-adult stage, and this is طبعا inshallah in the afternoon. We will discuss some of this in the series of Dr. Yahya Rakhawi, which depend on what Haeckel said about the recapitulation. Then the ontogeny repeat the phylogeny. Mosaic evolution implies that some aspect of phenotype may have evolved through development, through retardation. Here, a comparison between the recent human being and our ancestor and how our brain how their brain will stop and take a plateau, but our brain will not take this plateau. And here, this is a comparison between the development of the brain after conception as embryo between the human being and lemur, macaque, gibbon, chimpanzee, human being. As long as there is evolution in the species, there will be retardation in the maturation, and this explains why we are more vulnerable to schizophrenia, because we are slower in neurogenesis, in neural migration, in apoptosis, arborization, and synaptic formation, okay, which give a chance to the environment to affect this. This is the evolutionary ontogeny of the schizophrenia, and a comparison between us and our macaque company, which are the macaque monkeys, which are one of the highest. And also, one of the supportive evidence for this social brain hypothesis is the discovery of mirror neurons. Mirror neuron not only was found in the human being, but they were found also in higher animals, but in a to less extent. They have been identified in Broca's area, the premotor cortex, the superior temporal sulcus, and the posterior parietal cortex, and they are under control of our frontal lobe, and this might explain the catatonia. When the patient simulates you, echobraxia or echolalia, that means his mirror controls are active without the control of frontal lobe, so they just imitate you, okay? Have been identified in Broca's area, the premotor cortex, the superior temporal sulcus, the posterior parietal cortex. They activate when the subject observes goal-directed action in another individual. Thus, they serve to mirror or stimulate observed. Our mirror neuron, the neuron which is the main area of the theory of mind, how to understand, how to feel the other people, and this is the main feature of the social brain. Our mirror neuron represents stimuli in non-visual modalities. That's why they are found in the visual area as well. That activate response. When we see somebody vomiting, for example, you feel also disgust. And when you feel somebody happy or laughing, you will laugh. This is the action of our mirror neuron. The mirror neuron system is located in the anatomical region called social brain, all the region we mentioned before. And this is the main areas which enhance our understanding of other and we become social animals. Mirror neuron abnormalities are now being detected in schizophrenia, and this is myotic stable catatonic echopraxia and echolalia. Then also the notion of prunning. You know, prunning means that we eliminate, the brain will eliminate the unnecessary connection. If somebody here is a farmer, you know that after the farmer cultivate the plant, after some time when it grow, he will take some of them to give space to the other. Okay? This is pruning. تأليم يعني بيسموه بيألم الشجر. Or sometimes we do it in the flower or tree. So pruning occurs in 2 stages of our life. In year 2 and during adolescence. In year 2, when the pruning fail, this is the autism. That is why the autistic children are larger than the normal children in year 2 or 3. They are larger and heavier than because there is no pruning happening. And also in schizophrenia, the pruning is very important to eliminate the unnecessary connection and to enforce the necessary connection. But when pruning is too much, this is the problem, this is the schizophrenia. So in autism, the pruning did not happen. In schizophrenia, it exceeds the limit. That exists pruning beyond normal apoptosis, and this is one of the... Here is the cliff-edge theory, which is related to pruning. So the pruning, and also this can apply to the sexual selection indicator fitness, go up to a certain limit. Then if it exceeds the certain limit, it will be the extreme of sexual attraction in the sexual theory, or it will be extreme pruning according to Jonas and Byrne. Okay, this is the cliff edge theory. And there are some experiments on pruning. The people who are of intelligence, the computer people, they design a program and they started to eliminate some of the connection in this program, so the computer responded better. Okay, responded better to the instruction. But when they increased the pruning, it failed. This is exactly what is the cliff-edged and the pruning theory of schizophrenia. Here, طبعا, this is the intra-hemispheric connection, inferior longitudinal fasciculus, fronto-occipital fasciculus, and also they found that the problem, as Byrne said, that the connectivity between areas of the brain. That is why in Japan, for example, they want to cause schizophrenia disconnective disorder of this connectivity, and our brain should be in a harmonious all the time. Okay? طبعا there is functional disconnectivity and actual connectivity or physical disconnectivity, and they found that people, when, for example, when we focus on something, some other area will be fired, and this was not found in schizophrenic people. So the problem of schizophrenic people, there is no healthy connectivity in different areas of the brain, and also interhemispheric connectivity, and this might also explain what Krauss say in the lateralization. I think this is what I want to say to you. I hope I conveyed. I know it is difficult and rough and need more time than this, but in summary, evolutional hypotheses about schizophrenia are abundant, but many are difficult to test. It could therefore be more appropriate to study individual symptoms, cluster or endotype, rather than choosing a broad phenotypic concept for evolutionary inquiry. And I'd like to thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much. A beautiful presentation. No, please. We have questions. Yes. Beautiful presentation by a great speaker. Actually, I'll start. I know there might be other questions, but forget 100 years ago. If we talk about the people we diagnose schizophrenia today, let's say we have 100 patients with the new guidelines, criteria, ICD-11, which is now even broader. Do you think it's one disease, like the ones we have when we say all of them has the schizophrenia, or do you think we're getting it wrong and there might be 2 or 3 different diseases, totally different?
I would like to say that I am a villager. I was born in a village, Egypt, and when I was young, I saw many of people whom I realized after that they are schizophrenic. But for these people, they were blessed people. They was blessed people. Everybody wanted to touch them and kiss them. They are blessed people, and they accepted in the family. They were accepted in the environment there in the village. Okay, they are. طبعاً هذا في شيء لله. So this is maybe an answer of this. The DSM-5 tried to make longitudinal and dimensional approach, but it failed. Until now, we are still in the domain of categorical approach of the psychiatric disorder. But we cannot, as you said, we cannot define schizophrenia as a separate entity. It should be dimensional.
Question. Please, can we have the mic for the... Yeah, they're coming to you. They're just coming to you.
Far it is mentioned
Sorry,
that
can we have the sound?
schizophrenia has a predisposing factor and a precipitating factor. To which one you give more weight and why?
I think, as I told now, in both theories, the social brain theory and the sexual selection theory, they give a very space to the predisposing factor. The predisposing factor, high fitness and the condition, and low fitness and the condition. So we are born with liability too. We are born with liability too, but we're not born with the disease. If we have proper fitness and the condition, will develop healthy and will be creative people, and this is explained why so many creative people are found in the families of schizophrenic people. But if the fitness and the condition are not appropriate, we might be vulnerable to schizophrenia. This is explaining the predisposing factor and the environmental or epigenetic factor.
Thank you, thank you.
Last question, please. Here. Oh, yes, 2 more questions. Yes?
Okay, so when we look at schizophrenia through an evolutionary lens, like you mentioned, there is some theoretical, probably also historical hypotheses that attribute some functionality to schizophrenia in the society. Like the ones you mentioned, advantageous adaptive gene theory, the shamanic hypothesis as well. So my question is, how can we look at the treatment and maybe rehabilitation of the rehabilitation process of schizophrenia through an evolutionary lens as well? Since through an evolutionary lens, as you mentioned, they had some functional role in society.
So functional role in rehabilitation, the question. How can we add that?
So how can we look at the rehabilitation
Come on,
process?
yeah, Dr. Omar, thank you for the question. You know that our brain is an elastic organ. It affects the environment and affected by the environment. And it is over-evolving. And I mentioned that, inshallah, in the afternoon, how our brain is still growing until the end of our life. So rehabilitation will change the pathway of our brain. The rehabilitation, the doctor mentioned now, the rehabilitation will enforce the connectivity in the areas in the brain which are adaptive and will delete the non-adaptive connection in the brain. Because it is very biological. What we have said now, it is very biological. It's not theoretical. Okay? So all are Okay?
Yeah. A wonderful, fascinating lecture by you. My own question is, in the last 70 years, simple schizophrenia has disappeared. Epiphrenia disappeared in the classification. So, do you think the evolution of the concept in the modern times and the evolutionary theories are synchronizing in some way to explain to us that what we call schizophrenia might change over the period of time?
Not only schizophrenia, all psychiatric disorder, depending on cluster of symptoms, طبعاً, which I think this is not some scientific. Our colleagues in other branches of medicine, they will look at us how you are diagnosing your disorder. There is no biological indicator, there is no biological marker. So until we find a core symptom, so many people try to find a core symptom to diagnose the different disease. Okay? And Jonathan Byrne believes that schizophrenia is problem of social interaction, mainly social interaction. And the depression is not like that. It's very related to social interaction. It is submission. Okay? Mania also need other. But schizophrenia is the detachment from others. So the main how to diagnose schizophrenia, when you cannot, our professor used to teach us, when you cannot communicate with the patient properly, diagnosed as schizophrenia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Talat. Thank you for the fantastic presentation. I think we're going to give you a trophy to say a big thank you. And Professor Johnson, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samer, our eminent speakers, for so